All right, so some notes. Some of this will be things we covered in class today. Some of it won't. This is your political cartoon. You can see you've got President Obama and the donkey or the Democrats up there on the tower of Obamacare being torn down. Good stuff. Anyway, let's get into the content. So, the president, and this is going to be the main focus of this entire unit, is the president. And since World War II and the Great Depression, the president's role has drastically increased. But the problem with that has been that the increase in authority has not kept up, nor have the resources available to meet those expectations. So essentially, the president is expected to do a lot of things that they have not been given the authority to take care of, nor have they been given resources to take care of those things. And the Constitution is far less specific about the formal powers of the president than it is Congress. And because of that, it has resulted in a massive expansion of power because they don't specifically say you can do this, you can't do that. It's kind of been gray, and presidents are people who want power, and they've done a lot to ensure that they get that power. And so Americans tend to be skeptical of people who seek power, and that stems back to our roots. I mean, we were founded. We're the oldest constitution in the world, and we were founded out of the tyranny of a monarchy and of a king. And so we've witnessed history, and throughout history, we've seen that a lot of people that have wanted power haven't had good reasons for wanting that power. They've been wanting to manipulate the people for their best interest. The vice president, not really that important. I like to compare him to like the backup kicker. You really don't need one, but then when you do, they all of a sudden have a pretty big role. The vice president is the president of the Senate. They are the deciding vote when the Senate is in a tie. So you think back to that video we watched about the NRA with Al Gore casting the deciding vote, the tie-breaking vote for the Senate. That is an example of that. In the 20th century, you'll see 5 of 18 presidents, and this is out of your textbook. 5 of 18 presidents were accidental presidents, meaning that they succeeded the job because they were the vice president. And so, that's like almost 30% it's about 30% of the time that happened. So that's pretty significant. So you don't think a whole lot about the vice president, and it hasn't happened since Nixon resigned. But if something happens to the president, that vice president is the man in charge. And then the 25th Amendment just goes through and formally outlines the order. If the president dies, who takes over? And it goes for quite a while outlining that. So that would be the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. This is really the only slide that will talk about the vice president. The rest of this will be focused on president. So first up, we get impeachment, and the constitutional grounds for impeachment are out. They are in the Constitution, Article 2, where it's discussed. I guess I just kind of gave you that one. What is the process? We'll look at here shortly. And has a president ever been impeached? We'll also have a slide detailing that. So there's some of the criteria. It doesn't have to be a crime. It's not like impeachment isn't necessarily like the president went and stole a candy bar or something. It could be that they were not acting properly. And that's sort of vague, but that's a part of it, and that's never happened. But it does tend to be for not acting in a way that the Constitution permits or acting against your government. And the thing is, it needs to be a grave offense, and that's the challenge, and that's a big reason that we don't see impeachments a lot, is because you kind of need to be able to prove that the person was deliberately acting without regard for the best interest of their country, without regard for the Constitution, and without regard for the government itself. So you can't just impeach somebody because you disagree with their policy. I mean, that's ridiculous. People disagree all the time, and so the whole point of voting is to get people that we want in office and if you have policymakers being impeached for disagreements, that would be absurd. And it's an inherently political process. Impeachment does not mean that criminal charges are being brought against you. It just means you're being removed from office. That is a inherently political thing, and so it's going to be political. So the process. So the president commits a crime or does something wrong. One of these these are the four things outlined in the Constitution: bribery, treason, high crimes, or other misdemeanors. And high crimes and misdemeanors are pretty vague. It's essentially political scientists have come to agree that they would be defined as acts against the government or the Constitution. And so what happens is the president does a bad thing, and then the House of Representatives brings formal charges against the president. And really, that's all an impeachment is formally charging the president. And the House of Representatives only needs a simple majority. It's that 51% number. If they do that, then they have formally charged the president. It goes to the Senate. The Senate is essentially sitting as the jury in the case, determining if the president is guilty or not. The Chief Justice would preside over the trial. If the Senate agrees that with a 2/3 majority that the president was acting unconstitutionally or did one of those four things, then the president would be removed from office, and the vice president would then take over. So, and that's important to note that it's just the removal from office. There's no criminal charges that get brought up in the impeachment process. If you impeach a president and you want to press criminal charges, you take them to a court of law. So the impeachment process is not the same as legal charges. We've had two presidents be impeached. One was Andrew Johnson, and he came in after Lincoln was assassinated, and he was impeached for his Reconstruction policies. He actually ended up being just one vote away from removal from office from that 2/3 number in the Senate. So it was very close for him. He was very nearly impeached. Bill Clinton was the other one that was impeached, and he also was not convicted. His was very partisan. It was almost entirely along partisan lines. And that's the thing is, it's on both cases. It was very, very party based or very partisan. And we've only seen it these two times, so it's not something presidents typically worry about. Nixon was not impeached. That is a common misconception. Many people think he was impeached. He resigned prior to being impeached. Many people believe that he would have been impeached had he not resigned, but I think he saw the writing on the wall and decided to leave office. And so those are some of the cases of impeachment. All right, so the president has several constitutional responsibilities. They are the commander-in-chief and the head of the executive branch. They negotiate treaties, they give a State of the Union address, and they make appointments. They are kind of, as far as the commander-in-chief goes, one person in charge is far more logical than having a whole group of people trying to make decisions. Wartime is, things move quickly. You need somebody to take decisive action. They're the head of the executive branch. They appoint people to their cabinet. They have a staff. They are in charge of ensuring that the law gets carried out. And so, they tend to appoint several heads of bureaucracy that also implement the laws that Congress passes and that they sign. They negotiate treaties, and that's a constitutional role. One thing to note is that treaties and appointments do require Senate ratification. And I would question, why do you think that this requires senatorial approval? And so the reason for things like treaties and appointments not being left to the House and the Senate, but only to the Senate, is these are national matters, and so we don't want proportional representation. We don't want states like Texas or California or New York to have a disproportionate say, because this is an agreement that we are coming into as a nation and as a collection of 50 states. And so we don't want to misrepresent this nation. It's a much more political agreement than it is a representation of the people. And so, keep in mind, you always got to remember, senators' job is to represent their states. And so in these cases, they are representing their states. A treaty is an agreement of the states of the United States with other nations. And so that makes sense that senators would be responsible for that. The House of Representatives, their job is to represent the people. And in a treaty is an agreement of the states, not necessarily of the people. The State of the Union address is given in January each year. That's come to be tradition. It doesn't specify that in the Constitution. It just says from time to time the President shall address Congress as to the State of the Union, or something along those lines. And that's going to be the yearly message that we've come to know. Historically, it was so that the President would travel around the country and he could come back and report to Congress, so somebody from Virginia could understand how things were in Maine and South Carolina and wherever else. Now with information traveling, it tends to be an opportunity for him to push his legislative agenda. And so I would encourage you to look at the table 12.3. It's in section 12.2. This does a good job of breaking apart the different constitutional powers of the president in good detail, so I would familiarize yourselves with those.